This course does not teach you how to use WordPress. This course goes beyond those basics. So I am going to assume that you have already got a working knowledge of WordPress but want to take it to the next level. If you don't know how to use WordPress, then I'd recommend you take my WordPress for Beginners course first, because this course is designed to give you a range of intermediate level skills to better manage your WordPress website, making you more skilled and a more proficient WordPress user. So what exactly are we covering? Well, here's a breakdown of the course curriculum. The course is divided into sections, and these sections will cover things like the WordPress files on your server, where files are located, what files are for. If you need to make changes or you need to edit files, this section will help you find those files. We'll talk about child themes and we'll create child themes. We'll look at WordPress pages in more detail, including things like parent-child relationships, page templates, template hierarchy, conditional statements, custom page templates and custom post templates. We'll talk about redirects. I'll show you how to set up HTTPS on most web hosts for free. We'll also look at site speed and mobile friendliness of your website. We'll cover design stuff like themes, dynamic widgets, custom sidebars, jump links. That's where you click a link on a page and it jumps further down the page to a different section. We'll have a look at some page builders, Gutenberg that comes with WordPress and Elementor, which is probably the most popular page builder out there. We'll look at favicons, what they are, how to use them, how to create them, how to install them on your site. We'll have a look at Google Recapture because there's a lot of confusion about this. We'll also look at Google Maps. I'll show you how to install a Google Map on your page, for example your About Us page, without using plugins. You don't need plugins for that. We'll also talk about post order if you need to reorder your posts in some way. We'll look at the media library and we'll cover WordPress users and roles. GDPR is something I'm constantly asked about, so there's a section on GDPR to help bring your site up to GDPR compliance. We'll talk a little bit about autoresponders and how they work and how you can put them to work on your website. We'll also look at site structure and how you can use different site structures with WordPress. If you want to build a business site, we've got that covered. If you want to build an affiliate site, we've got that covered. We'll look at click-through rate and time on site and how you can use Google tools to help find that information and help try to change and improve your click-through rate. We'll look at the most common WordPress problems and how to solve them. And then another thing that I'm constantly asked, we'll look at staging your site. That is where you have a copy that you can work on, and when you're happy with the changes, you can push them to the live site. And finally, we'll look at developer tools that you can use to help tweak the design of your website. This course currently has over 80 lectures on this information. So if you want to take your WordPress skills to the next level, then let's get started. Download WordPress, and I'm going to click on the Get WordPress button and then click Download WordPress 5.21. This file is a zip file, and if I open the zip file, you can see that the zip file contains a folder called WordPress. This folder contains all of the WordPress core files, basically the programming behind WordPress, the things that make WordPress work. Obviously this is only part of the equation. You know that WordPress uses a database as well, and that is completely separate from these files. But if we open that WordPress folder, you can see there are 3 folders: WP Admin, WP Content and WP Includes, and then you've got a number of files. You can quite easily spot most of the files in this directory because they start with WP Admin. That's not the case if you then log in and go into some of these other folders, but it's a quick way to spot your WordPress root directory because you see WP Admin, WP Content, WP Includes, and then these WP- files. It doesn't matter whether you install WordPress manually by downloading WordPress zip file and then installing it on the server, or whether you do it using an automated tool like Softaculous. What will happen is these files and folders will be transferred to your web host. They'll be put into a folder that is designated to be used for your website. That could be in the public HTML folder, or it could be a subfolder of the public HTML folder. What I want to do in this first section of the course is to have a look on the server at these folders and some of these files and look to see what they actually do in WordPress. The point of it is that when you know what folders and files do within your WordPress install, you'll know what needs to be backed up and you'll know what you can and cannot touch. So that's what we're going to do in the next few lectures. What we need to do though is to be able to look on the server, and to do that you're going to need to use a tool like FTP, or you could use File Manager that's found inside cPanel. We're going to have a look at both methods, and in the next lecture we're going to set up FTP and then log into the server to have a look at the files of a WordPress site on the server. FTP means File Transfer Protocol, and in essence, it's a way of manipulating files on a web server. We can upload files, download files, edit files, all from within an FTP application. So what we're going to do in this lecture is to set up an FTP account on our web host. That's the first step. And then use some software to access the web space. And the application that we're going to use is called filezilla. There are other FTP programs, so if you have your favorite, please stick with it. I don't personally use filezilla myself. I use something called WinSCP, but it is a Windows-only application. I'm showing you filezilla here because it works on Windows and on Macs. When you go over to the website, click on the Download FileZilla client, and you'll be given an option for Windows or for Mac and Linux operating systems. If you are on a Mac or Linux, you can just click on this Show Additional Download Options, and then you're given all of the options here. You might even want to click on that link if you're a Windows user, if you're using 32-bit Windows and you need to use the 32-bit FileZilla. But you can see there we've got Windows, Mac, Linux, and even the source code down there. So download the application and install it. And when you do and you run it, this is the application that you get. It's a file manager. It's like the file manager on Windows. It's a way of seeing what files are in different directories. So I can see on my local drive over here all of my files and folders, and then the remote site is grayed out over on the right hand side because I'm not connected to the server. To connect to the server we need to have an FTP account, and so that's what we're going to do next. We're going to set up an FTP account on our web host. To do that, you need to log into your cPanel and look for the section Files. In my case, it's at the very top, which is useful. And in Files, you'll see that you've got File Manager, which we will use briefly in this lecture, but also we'll have a look at it in a little bit more detail in the next lecture. And then we've got FTP accounts. So let's click on FTP accounts to go to the screen where we can create a new FTP account. At the very top, we've got login information, and this is going to give us our username. So for this, I'm going to just do a demo FTP account. My username will be demo at, and then whichever domain I want to set up the FTP for. I'm going to set it up for my personal website, so I need to select that domain from the drop-down list. There we go. Now that is going to give me my username. My username is going to be demo@andyjwilliams.co.uk. I need to enter a password. Let me just enter it manually here. Okay, so I've typed the password, I've typed it again to verify, and the next thing we've got is the directory. Now, this is the directory that this FTP account is going to give you access to. Remember that your server has lots and lots of folders on it, and you don't necessarily want to create an FTP account that gives you access to every folder. If you're creating an FTP account for someone who's doing some work on the site, then you only want to give them access to that site. So I only want to create this FTP account to give access to the folder where this website is installed. And I can tell you this isn't it. That folder doesn't exist on my server. If we go back to cPanel, and we're going to have a quick look at File Manager here, because this will list all the files and folders on our site. You can see that at the top here, we've got all of these files and folders inside Home Cheebles. If we go back to the FTP account creation, you can see that Home Cheebles is there. I can't change that. That's because all of my folders and all my files are within that one folder. What's not there is andyjwilliams.co.uk and demo. That folder doesn't exist. If I scroll down, what I'm looking for is the public HTML folder, and I know that my website is stored inside there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to type in public HTML. Now the chances are your domains are also going to be stored inside the public HTML folder. In my case, if I click to open that, all of my websites listed over here on the right are all within that public HTML in their own little folders. You can see that there's a folder called andyjwilliams.co.uk, and that is the folder where this website is held. So in this case, what I want to do is put /andyjwilliams.co.uk, and it's auto completing for me, so I know that I've got the folder right. So that is all I need to enter in here to create my FTP account. Before I do though, I want to mention something. The fact that I've got a public HTML folder with subfolders representing different domains, like for example, I've got this subfolder andyjwilliams.co.uk, which is a subfolder of public HTML. That's because my web hosting account has more than one domain in it. If you've only got one domain in your web hosting account, then the chances are your website is going to be stored in this folder, public HTML. And if you look in your public HTML folder, you'll see WP admin, WP content, WP includes. If I go back to my file manager, you can see I'm in the public HTML folder, and I've scrolled to the bottom, and down here, look, WP admin, WP content, WP includes. And if I scroll further down, you'll start to see the WordPress files, WP comments, WP config, WP cron, all the rest of it. So in my public HTML folder, there is actually a website already installed. If you've got multiple domains on your web host, then you'll have a main domain that was used to set up your website. And that main domain is the one that's going to be stored inside public HTML. When you add what's called add-on domains, you're going to start getting you're going to start getting folders created for each of those add-on domains. So andyjwilliams.co.uk is an add-on domain to this hosting account. The public HTML contains my main domain for this account, which happens to be the harlan.co.uk, and all of these files run the harlan.co.uk website, but the andyjwilliams.co.uk website is run from within this subfolder, and you can see I've got WordPress installed in there. So this is the folder that I want to give access to with this FTP account. So let me just accept that, and we're going to click on the Create FTP button. My password software is asking to remember it. I'm not actually going to keep this, so I don't need to remember the details. And that is actually done. I don't seem to have notification of it, but if I scroll to the bottom of this page, what you can see is the account listed. So we've got demo at andyjwilliams.co.uk, and we've got some links over here. I'm going to click on the Configure FTP client because this will actually tell me the FTP details that I need to go and put into FileZilla. Okay, and so it's now opened up. We've actually got an FTP configuration file which you can use to import into FileZilla if you want to. You will have to still go in and put your password, but all I'm going to use is these manual settings up here. Let me just copy them to Notepad. I also am going to need my password. I know what my password is, so that's fine. So now I can go back to FileZilla, and I'm going to click on the Site Manager button top left to open the Site Manager, and then click on New Site, and I'm going to call this Andy Demo. Over on the right hand side, it's asking for protocol. We want FTP. The host is the server. So we've just copied that across. The port we know is 21, and the username is that. I can also type in my password. And before I click on OK to save it, one thing I need to change here is the encryption, because we're not actually encrypting this. This is a plain FTP insecure connection. So I'm going to click on OK to save, and then to run and to connect to my server using FileZilla, I can either click on the little down arrow and select Andy, or I go to Site Manager, make sure I've got the Andy demo selected, and then click on Connect. And then you'll see up here in the top, it's actually telling you what's happening. It retrieves directory listing and then it lists the directory. And this then is the folder that contains my andyjwilliams.co.uk website. If I scroll down it, you can see the WP settings, WP login, WP cron, all of the WordPress files. And if I scroll up a little bit more, you'll be able to see WP content, WP admin, WP includes. So I've now got access to all of the files and folders on my site using FTP. Now remember, FileZilla is a file manager. So on the right hand side here we've got the remote site, in other words your web server and the files contained on your web server. On the left you've got your local site, which is your hard drive. So you can actually move files across from one side to the other. You can right click files on your hard drive and click on upload. You can similarly right click on the server and click download. One of the useful options here is to be able to view edit your file on the server. So if I wanted to edit my htaccess file, I can right click it and then click on view edit, and it will then download a copy to your computer and it will view in a text editor that you've got on your computer. The other thing you might have to do is set permissions, although you don't often have to do this, and you can do that as well from that right click menu, but we're not going to look at that because that isn't something you should have to do. So that's FileZilla, a great little file manager that's free, works on PC, Macs and Linux, and it's the way that I normally go in and make changes or edit files or do things on my server if I need a file manager. In the next lecture though, we'll have a look at file manager in cPanel because that is an easier option, but there is one or two things that you need to know about that if you're going to use it effectively. In the last lecture we set up FileZilla so that we could access our web server through an FTP connection. In this lecture we're going to have a look at File Manager, which is built into cPanel. Even though I use FTP for most of the things I need to do on my server, File Manager is still really useful because it gives you a quick way of getting into the server and do what you need to do and then get out. So we're going to have a quick look at that. So once you're in cPanel, click on File Manager and it'll open up in a new window. And you can see here that we've got the same files and folders that we saw using FileZilla. And let me just go back to FileZilla. I'm going to bring up the Site Manager and just connect to the server so you can see this. Okay, what we've got in this folder on the remote side is the website andyjwilliams.co.uk. If we go back to File Manager, that andyjwilliams.co.uk site is inside my public HTML. So let's open up public HTML and then I'm going to click on the folder containing my site. And then if I bring FileZilla back, we should be able to have a look and see that the folders are very similar. We've got blog, CGI bin, data feeds. Here we have blog, CGI bin, data feeds. We've got DL, IM Prodigy, LSI, DL, IM Prodigy, LSI, and so on. So the files that we're looking at in FileZilla are the same ones that we're looking at in File Manager. We did notice something over here though, or you might not have noticed, but we've got this well-known. And if I scroll down, we've also got FTP quota, HTTP access. If I look on File Manager, scroll down, first of all, we don't have that top well-known folder, and we also don't have .ftp quota and HTTP access file. That's because by default, File Manager usually has hidden files for the files that it thinks you shouldn't be playing with. An HTTP access file is one of those files that configures the server, and File Manager doesn't want you playing with that, but sometimes you need to get into that. So let's have a quick look at how we can show those hidden files and folders. If you click on the settings button top right and then just put a check mark next to show hidden files, and that is basically the dot files, and you can see there now we've got the dot well known has appeared, the .ftp quota and the .ht access file. So we've now got full access to the hidden files on the server. So let's have a look at the basics of using File Manager. When you select a file or a folder, you'll notice that these items up here are either grayed out or they're enabled. For example, you'll see that extract is disabled there, but if I click on a zip file in the list, you can see extract then becomes visible. All of these items up here can also be accessed through a right-click menu when you right-click on one of the items in the list, so I can access those along here as well. So for example, if I click a zip file, I can click on extract from the menu or extract up here, and that will extract the file directly into this folder. I could also select some of the items in the list, right click and click on compress, and that would allow me to create a zip file with these files inside the zip file. If we have a look at some of these other options, we've got move and we've got copy, and these both work the same way. If you select move, it's going to ask you where do you want to move it to, and you'll get the same options if you select copy, and this is the location on your server. So let's go and have a look. We've got the andyjwilliams.co.uk. I've also got a folder there called DL. There's nothing in DL, but let's try the copy command, and what I'll do is I will copy, let's say, this file here to, and I'll put /DL. Click on copy files, and now if I go into my DL, I can see that the file has been copied across. So that's how you would use copy and move. With FTP it's slightly different. You can just drag and drop files. If we continue looking down the options, we've got rename. If we want to rename a file, gives you the option to type in a different name for the file. We can change permissions. Wouldn't touch that unless you know what you're doing though. The only other thing probably that you're going to want to do is to create files or to create folders. You can see I make good use of folders. Even though this is a WordPress website, I've got folders on my server where I keep files, and then I can link to them from within articles, or I can send people links which link directly to something. So I do make good use of folders, and you can do that even if you've got a WordPress site. You can see this is a WordPress site. I've got WP admin, WP content, WP includes, and we've got all the WP files, but I've got so much more on this website as well at the same time, and that's perfectly okay. If you want to create a folder, you click on the create folder button there, and then type in a name for it, and it says where do you want to create it, and at the moment the default will be wherever you currently are, and where I currently am is in public HTML /andyjwilliams.co.uk. I could type something in here, not there, up here. Let's say we'll call it a demo folder, create new folder, and then when it refreshes you'll see we have that demo folder. There's nothing in it. Now I'm in the demo folder there. To go back to the original folder I can always click it from the sidebar here, or you can click on this up one level. And perhaps before we go, we ought to have a look and see what happens when you can delete something. Let's right click. I'm going to delete that file, and you've got the option of skipping the trash. That will permanently delete the file, so it's you can't come back from that. If you select skip the trash and confirm, then it will be gone for good. What you can do is if you send it to trash first, then you've got a trash option up here to view the trash. You can see what's in there, and there's that file I just deleted. In the right menu then we've got the restore link, and that will restore the file back to where we were. Let me go back into andyjwilliams.co.uk, and you can see that file is now back again. So that's a very quick overview of using the file manager built into cPanel. It is really useful, so if you want to use it, feel free to use it. If you want to use just FTP, feel free to use that. If you want to use both, and quite often I do, then that's okay as well. In this lecture, I want to have a look at the files and folders that WordPress will install on your server. Now you might be thinking, why do you need to know about these? And there are a few reasons why you should have a better understanding of what they do and where they are. Firstly, you'll get to learn which are the core files and which are user generated. In other words, which ones are installed as part of the WordPress installation and which ones are added as you use WordPress. You'll learn where the media is uploaded. And you'll also learn where themes are saved and plugins are uploaded. And you'll also find out which files are WordPress configuration files. Knowing all of this means that you know which files need to be backed up. And if you need to go in and access files to edit them or to troubleshoot your installation, you'll know where to find them as well. So let's start by logging in to the web server, and I'm using filezilla, and I'm going to use the same website that I've used earlier in the course so far. You can see the files for my andyjwilliams.co.uk website. The first file I want to mention is the htaccess file. The htaccess file, as you know, is often hidden, and if you are using File Manager in cPanel, you need to go in and unhide that. The htaccess file gives commands to the server before your web pages even start to load. I want to show you what the htaccess file looks like. So in FileZilla you can right click a file and click on View Edit. That will download the file and open it in a text editor on your computer. Now, what you see in your htaccess file will depend on whether you've installed certain plugins. For example, the first bit of code in my htaccess file is basically added by the all-in-one security plugin. Let me scroll down a few lines and show you the code that WordPress will install. When WordPress installs, these lines are added to your htaccess file. They may be the only lines in your htaccess file because you may not have installed any other plugins that manipulate this file. Or your file might look a little bit different depending on whether you've come in and edited it. But essentially, you've got this comment begin WordPress, this comment end WordPress, and everything in between is code that's been added by WordPress. So don't touch that unless you know what you're doing. White space in these files, as long as you're not breaking up things, like if I put a space in there, I'm breaking up a command rewrite rule. But between lines, you can add white space, and that won't affect the htaccess file. If I scroll up slowly, you'll see there is a lot of code above this that WordPress has added. This first line here is a comment begin all-in-one WP security, and everything between that and the end WP security. Here we are, got another comment end all-in-one WP security. All of this was added by the all-in-one security plugin. When I was configuring the plugin, this is where all the settings were saved. So this htaccess file is being used for that. After that code, we've got begin ls cache, and this is a plugin called Lightspeed Cache that I use on my file, and this cache speeds up my WordPress website. All of the configurations of this cache are written to the htaccess file. So again, we've got this. These comments are being added by the plugin just to tell you what the code is. And at the end of the code, we will have something to tell us it's the end of the code. We are Lightspeed Cache plugin. Do not edit all of the content of this block. End. And then we have the Lightspeed Cache code. So again, you may not have that. If you're not using Lightspeed Cache, you won't have anything that looks like that. You'll only have this particular bit of code. So that's the first important configuration file. It's a file that will be looked at before pages even load. And later in this course, when we look at redirects, we will revisit this file because we can add redirects to the htaccess file, which will stop certain web pages loading. Instead of a web page loading, another one will automatically be loaded through a redirect. But we'll look at that in the redirect section of the course. For now, let's have a look at the next type of configuration file. And if we scroll down to the WP config files, you can see there's a file called wp-config sample.php, and in my case there is wp-config.php. When WordPress installs, it's this file, the wp-config sample.php, that is installed. The idea is that you have to edit that file and then rename it to wp-config.php. The wp-config sample.php has no purpose in the running of my website. If it's there, if you have it, then delete it. The whole point of this file is to give you a template to fill in as you're installing WordPress. If you use Softaculous or any other one-click installer, then this wp-config sample file would have been filled in automatically for you and then renamed as wp-config. So that is the final file that you end up with, wp-config.php, and that contains information about the database you're using on the server, the username and password, and something called the key salts. Let's have a quick look. I'm going to open up the wp-config sample file so we can have a look and see what is included. At the top, we've got some comments, and you can see here the file contains the following configurations. MySQL settings. MySQL is the database format, so it's the database, the username and password. Secret keys, I call them the key salts. Database table prefix. This is something that's added to the front of your database table names to try to stop hackers having easy access to them. And something called the ABS path, which we're not really going to look at. If we scroll down the MySQL settings, we've got the database name. So if you're installing manually, or the Softaculous script, if you're using that, will put the database name in here. It'll put the database user here, and it'll put the database user's password in here. Keep on scrolling down to see if there's anything else that we would change. Here we have the keys and salts. It's called here, unique keys and salts. And these are for increased security. You will have keys added into each of these sections. If you want to see what they look like, go and copy this URL into a web browser, and you'll see that you'll get a list of all of these security keys and their values, which you can then paste in here. If you've used Softaculous again, you don't need to do it. It's done automatically for you. Then we've got the table prefix. The default for WordPress is WP. That's not very secure. So when you're using Softaculous, that is automatically randomized, so you don't have to worry about it. We keep scrolling down. We have a few other bits of information down here. That's the WP config sample. So if you were installing WordPress manually, you would have edited all that, put in the correct values, and then just renamed it WP config. In my case, because it's there and it shouldn't be, I'm going to just delete it. And we're left with WP config, which has all of the correct data so that the server knows where my database is, knows where the username is, knows the password, knows how to access my MySQL database and everything else. The next file I want to mention is the index.php file. Now, if you've ever developed websites using HTML, you'll know that you would have had an index.html or index.html or home.html file, and that is the home page of the site. All sites need to have this index page. This WordPress site is no different. It needs an index file. Now, this file doesn't really do an awful lot. If we have a look at it, it tells you at the top here, front to the WordPress application. This file doesn't do anything but loads a WP blog header, which does tell WordPress to load the theme. However, this is a vital file, and if it's not there, you're going to get a 403 error. If I just copy that across to my hard drive to save it, let me just bring in my website here. I'm going to refresh so you can see that it's loading fine. And then let's go back and we're going to delete the index.php file so that it no longer exists. If I go back to my site now and click on refresh, 403 forbidden. That index.php file is the thing that is missing, and it is vital. If you don't have it, then your site isn't going to work. You don't have to normally worry about that, but if you are having a 403 error like the one you've just seen, then do make sure that you have the index.php file. I've copied it back. If I refresh now, you can see my website springs back into action. Another file you may hear a lot about and you may have in your root folder is this one, the robots.txt file. If you don't have it, don't worry. The idea behind the robots.txt file is to communicate with web crawlers, whether it's a web crawler, a spider from Google, or whether it's some bot trying to get access to pages on your website. This file communicates with them and says, yes, you can, or no, you can't. If you look online for advice about what you should include in your robots.txt file for WordPress sites, you might get a whole stack of different answers. The truth is, with WordPress sites, you don't really need to have a robots.txt file. Google is fully aware of where WordPress stores files, is fully aware of what it needs access to, and so it's best just to give Google full access to your site. Others may disagree, but this is how I run my WordPress sites, and I never have a problem in doing that. So if you do have a robots.txt file, by all means go in and have a look and see what's included. But if you don't have one, don't worry. Another file you may or may not have on your site is called a favicon. And the favicon controls this image that you can see up here in the tab on this browser. On my site, I don't have one, but we will be creating one later in this course, and I'll show you how to install it so you can have whatever image you want up there. But if you have favicon.ico, then you know what it's for. It's a small image that's used for the tabs in navigation bars. So those are the main files in the root folder that I wanted to cover. You've got a lot of other files here, all beginning WP-. I'm not going to go into the details of what all of those are for. The fact that they start with WP means they are WordPress core files, and so you shouldn't really touch them unless you need to. The next thing I want to look at, though, are these three folders: WP Admin, WP Content, and WP Includes. The WP Admin folder is a really important one. It contains WordPress core files, and they are files that you shouldn't touch. Probably the simplest way to understand what these files do is to think about your WordPress dashboard. All of the menu items down the left hand side, all of the screens inside the dashboard, all of that is controlled by the files in the WP Admin folder. Many of the files are going to be called something that mimics their role in the dashboard. So we've got comment here, so that's going to have something to do with the comment section of your dashboard. We've got media library, media upload, media new, menu header, menu. We've got options screen. So we've got, in the dashboard, you've got a setup menu. We've got a discussion section, a general section, a media section, a permalink section, a reading section, a writing section. All of these controlled by these WP admin files. If you install a security plugin for your WordPress site, chances are that security plugin will protect this folder in some way. If hackers gained access to the WP admin folder, then they would have access to the files that control the dashboard and the admin of the site, and they could completely destroy or manipulate your site in any way they wish. Therefore, this folder, core WordPress files, really important, don't touch them. The next folder I want to talk about is the WP Content folder. And the WP Content folder you can think of more as user-generated content. It's where the things that you upload will go. So, for example, we've got a folder for themes. And if I look in there, I can see that I've got two themes installed, 2019 and Astra. So those are themes that I've uploaded. They go into the WP Content folder. Similarly, plugins. If I look inside the plugins menu, I can see there's lots of plugins installed. These are things that I have installed myself. Therefore, you can count those as user-generated content, themes and plugins. Uploads folder. These are things that I've uploaded through the media library. You can see that these are organized by date. So they're all stored inside there as well. And if we have a look, let's just have a look inside one of these dates. You can see that for each year there are 12 folders, one for each month of the year, and the images that I've uploaded, if there are any images there, I can see there aren't any in here, but if there were any images uploaded in those years on those months, then they would be uploaded there as well. So again, a user generated bit of information in this folder. The upgrade folder is a folder that's often used by WordPress to store information, store files when it's doing an upgrade. This Updraft folder is a plugin, Updraft Plus I think it's called, which is a backup plugin which I use. We've also got cached files here, backups here, and this is the all-in-one security plugin backups as well. So we've got backups being held inside the WP Content folder. If for any reason you are manually backing up your WordPress site, then this is a really important one to back up, because this is not included with the WordPress installation. These are your files, your user-generated content. The final main folder that WordPress will install is the WP Includes folder. And again, this folder contains a lot of core admin files, and you shouldn't really do anything with it. In fact, I think if you were to count them, you would find more core files in the WP Includes folder than you would in the WP Admin folder. I don't really have anything else to say about this folder other than, again, just leave it alone, don't touch it. There is one other core file that I want to look at, but I'm going to save it for the next lecture because this one's been quite long already and it sort of stands on its own. It's the Functions.php file. In this video, we're going to have a quick look at the Functions.php file. What is it, where is it, and how you can edit it. You can change the default behavior of WordPress using this file. It's found in your Themes folder. If I log into my web server using filezilla, you'll remember that the Themes folder is found inside WP Content because it's what we call user-generated content. And inside that folder, we need to go to the Themes folder. You can see here I've got two themes installed, Astra and 2019. The Functions.php file is found inside the themes folder. Now on this site I'm currently using Astra, so if I was going to add functions to the Functions.php file, I would go into my Astra folder and add them there. However, you need to be aware that the Functions.php file is specific to the folder of your theme. So if you make changes to the Astra theme function.php file, then you change themes to the 2019, well, inside the 2019, it's got its own functions.php file, and that won't have the edits that you made in the Astra functions.php file. So essentially, you need to remember that if you add functions to your functions.php file and then at a later date you change to a different theme, you'll need to update that theme's function.php file to contain the functions that you want to keep. If I open the functions.php file, you can see that it contains a lot of code, and that code contains functions being little programmable pieces of code that will do something on your site, contains functions that control the look and feel of the website. You can see that this is the functions.php file of the Astra theme, and Astra has a lot of its own information defined within the functions.php file. But essentially, you are free to edit this functions.php file if there is a function or a bit of programming code that you want to add to it. And you can use native PHP functions, WordPress functions, or define your own functions. Obviously, you need to be a little bit of a programmer to be able to do that, but you will find functions online that you might want to add to your functions.php file. Sometimes you're following a tutorial on, for example, how to remove the WordPress version information from your WordPress site, and that may include adding a function to your functions.php file. And so we're actually going to go through that example right now, and I can show you how you can do that. To demonstrate the issue, here is a demo site of mine. This is actually on the local host. It's on my own computer, so it's not on a web server. But if I view the page source and then go in and search for WordPress 5.11, which is the version of WordPress I'm using on this site, you can see that WordPress has actually inserted a tag called generator that gives the version of WordPress that I'm using. Now, in terms of security, that's not great, because if WordPress 5.11 has a security issue that is known, then hackers can look for websites that are using version 5.11 so they can attack them. Obviously, it would be better if we could just remove that altogether. And that's what I'm going to show you quickly how to do now. I'm not a coder, at least not in PHP, so I wouldn't be able to write the code myself. But here it is. I found it online. It's basically a function to remove the version number. And you need to be careful with curly brackets. In fact, you need to be careful with all of the brackets and the formatting, because programming code has a syntax and you have to follow it. This is the exact syntax for the function to remove the version information from my theme. So I'm going to just copy that, and I've opened up my themes function.php file in Notepad, and as you can see, we've got all the Astra settings. What you don't want to do is to break up any other code. So to be on the safe side, what I would suggest you do is scroll to the very bottom and make sure you've got a couple of lines at the bottom. You can add some white space there, is no problem. Paste in the function, and then we're going to save that. If we go back to the site now, I'm going to refresh the site, reload the page, and then look at the source code again. I'm going to search for Windows 5.11, and you can see here it comes up as 0 of 0 found. WordPress 5.11 is no longer in the source code. So that function that we've just added to the functions.php file has removed the version number. Just to show you that that is true, let's go in reverse. Let's delete the function, go back to the site and refresh, and view source code. I'm going to search for Windows 5.11, and there it is back again. So that's a really quick example of inserting a function into your PHP file. You can't really hurt your installation if you make sure you don't break up any code. So for example, where we've got these curly brackets, where you have an opening curly bracket where the little bracket point points to the left, you'll have a closing curly bracket where the little point points to the right. So that is a block of code. So you wouldn't want to break up that with your function. You're going to end up breaking WordPress. So always make sure that you scroll to the end, insert it there, save it, and then those functions will start to work with your theme.